We have all imagined it, that quiet private vow. It ends with me, the first of my bloodline to speak differently, to act differently, to refuse to hand down suffering as if it were heritage. The first who will say, with trembling and with courage, I will not pass this on. Salutations, my name is Immaculate. Welcome to this channel where I show you the countryside, its visible beauty and its hidden struggles, and where I also invite you into conversations of consequence. I lean on the psychology of things, for that is the lens I carry. In that spirit, permit me to ask plainly, do we truly break generational curses, or do we merely rebrand them? When we speak of generational curses, we mean many things. In some houses and some faiths, the phrase points to spiritual forces or the idea that misfortune clings to a family line. In common speech, it captures repeated patterns. Poverty that seems to follow a family, marriages that end in the same ways, anger passed down like hearth song, silence that deepens rather than heals, addiction and domestic violence. Yet in modern psychological language, the phrase is less about spells and more about patterns. These are ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving that travel down the years, not because an ancestor intended harm, but because human beings teach the next generation how to survive. The grandparents taught the parents how to survive, the parents taught the children, and so on. Over time, these survival ways become mistaken for law. Put plainly, your grandmother's wound can become your mother's habit, and your mother's habit may become your struggle. Unless somewhere someone wakes up and asks, is this still needed? In recent years, the phrase break generational curses has become a rallying cry and a fashion. It is on captions, on hoodies, on short clips where a person screams into the sky that their lineage ends with them. It feels empowering to declare that you will be the one to stop the chain. But that popularity brings a problem. When a deep practice becomes a slogan, it risks being worn as an accessory rather than lived as a discipline. Many declare themselves liberators, yet do not do the difficult, slow work of change. Thus, the danger, we may gain the language of healing without the labor of it. We may repurpose our old ways into new images. Consider Sisyphus, who in myth must push his stone up the hill, only to watch it roll back down. Families can feel like that. Some burdens are pushed again and again, generation after generation. A descendant may leap and cry, I shall not push this stone. And yet, reach for the same stone and polish it. so that it gleams. The question is not whether the stone looks different. The question is whether we still believe the hill must be climbed by pushing the same stone. Now, I want us to look into coping mechanisms and survival mechanisms, as they will play a role in understanding these generational patterns we are talking about. So, a coping mechanism is a method a person adopts to get through hardship. It is a habit, like a rule, a way of behaving that helps someone survive in a particular circumstance. When danger is near and options are few, the mind and body form quick solutions. These solutions are not chosen for beauty, they are chosen because they work in urgent moments. Now, a survival mechanism is like a cousin of coping. It is a broader pattern, a cultural or familial practice that protected earlier generations. For example, when poverty stalks a family, a parent may teach their children to put food and rent above all else. In a time of hunger, this saved lives. Why explain this plainly? Because not everyone knows the jargon. If you hear coping mechanism and think it means something mystical, let me be clear. It is simply a practical habit that once helped. The trouble comes when the practical habit is carried on long after the danger has passed. We also need to understand how these patterns get passed on. They travel by example, by instruction, by silence, by unspoken assumptions. Children watch. They learn how adults speak in crisis, how adults soothe themselves, where adults place their value. Over decades, these small learned actions pile into a family culture. Sometimes biology plays a part. Stress shapes the nervous system, but most of the transmission is ordinary human teaching. Permit me a confession. My mother taught us a rule. She had lived through seasons of want. Her rule was simple and sensible. When you receive money, the first thing you must secure is rent. The second is food. After that, perhaps you may think of other comforts. This rule kept us safe. When there was little, we still had shelter and bread. Yet, when I went to campus, I found that this lesson had another face. Even when I had money enough to buy a seat, a gas cooker, or a pair of shoes beyond the single pair I rationed, guilt would take its seat. My mother's voice would speak inside me. You never know what will come knocking on the door. I remember a friend who received a large sum from his father and used part of it to buy a television. At the time, my mind could not fathom such freedom. How could he be so unbothered by rent? Now, I see that his freedom was not ignorance but a permission to live differently. But for me, the habit of fear sat like a weight. To this day, I still wrestle with that habit. I honor my mother's wisdom. I also acknowledge that the same wisdom has bound me in seasons when binding was not required. This, dear listener, is the fine line between a protective teaching and a chain. Recently, I was having a conversation with my mom about how our generation is afraid of marriage because of the patterns that probably we have experienced or watched our parents go through. And then she reminded me of a time not long past in Kenya when the entry grade for girls to enter campus was lower than for boys. A girl who achieved C plus could be admitted while a boy with the same grade could not. The policy aimed to encourage the girl child to pursue higher education, to correct an injustice that kept girls at home and away from learning. And it worked. Girls began to lead in national exams. Yet, a new problem arose. Men and boys felt disadvantaged. A new inequality took shape. The nation adjusted again, standardizing grades so that boys and girls faced the same threshold. My mother's point was sharp. We mend what the previous generation broke, yet our fixes can create new harm unless we continually re-evaluate. The bandage applied in one era may need to be removed in the next. With this, she was trying to tell me that even in their generation, they had seen cycles that they were trying to break. In that process, they rebranded the trauma, unknowingly that is, with the aim to do better. Imagine a forebear who built a home in a terrible storm. They nailed the windows shut to keep wind and rain away. For them, this was wisdom. But if you live generations later and the storm has passed, those nailed windows keep out light as well as rain. The house remains safe, yes, but it is also dim and small. Look at an umbrella. It is indispensable in the rain, absurd in fair weather. A wise man carries it when clouds gather and sets it aside when the sky clears. The tragedy is when we pass umbrellas to children who will never see the rains we feared. We should teach how to use an umbrella, but not insist that everyone must carry one at all times. I will use this last analogy. Consider the man who was once blind and used a stick to walk. When sight is restored, some might say he is ungrateful for discarding the stick that once kept him safe. I say instead that he is wise. Why cling to a tool whose purpose has vanished? The stick is not contempt for the past. It is recognition that tools are for seasons, not forever. You need to ask yourself this: if my life mirrors the life of my parents in every meaningful habit, have I truly been free? If my household still behaves as those scarcity rules when my circumstances have changed, who do I protect by clinging to that fear? Is my sobriety of joy a sign of prudence, or is it fear masquerading as virtue? These questions are designed not to shame but to settle. Honest self-inquiry is the scalpel we must use. I will set out practical steps you may walk slowly and steadily. These are not miracles, they are practices. Healing takes discipline, time, and community. Number 1, you need to name the pattern. Create a list of family rules you live by without thought. Money rules, communication rules, emotional rules. Yeah. Ask yourself, who taught me this? When? In what circumstance was it necessary? Write a short lineage of the rule. Who used it? How it helped? And when it stopped being necessary. And now, for the first time, I am going to give you guys homework. So I want you to spend at least an hour writing a family pattern map. 3 columns titled Pattern, Origin or Reason. And then the third one should be, does it serve me now? Feel it as honestly as you can. Next, you need to make the distinction between survival and habit. For example, for each pattern, ask yourself, is this protecting me from a real present danger, or is it limiting my ability to thrive? If it is survival, keep it until you can replace it with another safety plan. If it is habit, practice letting it go. So the checklist is, does this pattern keep me safe today? Is it yes or no? Does it take from my ability to enjoy life? Yes or no? And now, for us to be able to change the conditioning of our brain, we need to do small experiments. For example, pick a small low-risk behavior to change for 30 days and make sure that you assess the progress. Replace inner commands with kinder phrases. If your ancestor taught you, never spend on nonsense, try, I honor frugality and I also permit joy within safety. And lastly, therapy helps rewire patterns. Look for trauma-informed counselors or therapists. If therapy is inaccessible, seek a trusted elder or friend and practice new ways together. Join peer groups where people practice healthy boundaries. Accountability softens the sharp edges of change. And when it comes to handing down change, let us teach differently. When you are ready to model new patterns, explain them simply to younger ones. Say, This kept me safe when I was small, but I choose different now because the world has changed. Share stories of the old way and the reason for change so the next generation learns context, not only rule. Look at this. You see, these trees are bending. These trees are bending, and that one over there, that one is broken, the others are bending. And do you know what? So, the last like 2-3 days, we've been experiencing, what do I say, very strong winds in the evening. So, I'm saying, the last like either 2, 3, or 4 days in the evening, we are experiencing very, very, very strong winds, extremely strong, and they are breaking the trees. Now this one, and do you know what? Our neighbor's tree, which was a eucalyptus, a very old eucalyptus actually, a strong one, was uprooted by these strong winds in the evening. But luckily, there was no one around there or a car passing by, so nobody was injured or anything, just that we lost electricity for about an hour. Yeah, because it fell on the electricity poles. So yeah, I should also probably leave this forest. As much as I am enjoying to stay here, yeah, it is not as safe. I am shocked. Imagine it broke, the wind broke a whole tree. And the way it seems to be strong from the bottom. They say my mom is coming to me. Oh my god. Yeah. To rebrand is to dress the old wound in new clothes and call it healed. Do not be tempted to swap one limiting script for another flattering one. If you spent your childhood learning to avoid joy, do not become an influencer who calls holding joy wisdom. Instead, let your life be the proof of nuanced change. Keep the tempering wisdom of your elders, but let joy and reason live together in you. So, what then is the answer? Do we break generational curses or do we rebrand them? My answer is this: we can and we must break them, but only with awareness, compassion, patience, and practice. We must hold the paradox, honor what protected us, and dare to shed what now binds us. If this piece touched you, I invite you to write in the comments, what umbrella are you still holding? What stick might you now set down? Share a small experiment you will try this month. If you would like, I will pin a comment with a short journaling challenge for the next 7 days. Thank you for listening under these wide skies. If this reflection helped you, consider subscribing and sharing with one friend who carries a heavy old umbrella. Until next time, may your hands learn to plant seeds and not carry stones.